Humans called them special forces. The galaxy prayed never to face them. The Great Hall of the Galactic Coalition headquarters stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction. And young diplomat Sirian had never felt so small in her entire life. She belonged to the Mirith, a species that had only achieved faster than light travel 3 standard years ago, and everything about this place made her feel like a child wandering through a giant's home. Around her sat representatives from dozens of species she had never seen before, and each one looked more strange and wonderful than the last. There were beings made of living crystal, creatures with too many eyes, and entities that seemed to exist partially in dimensions she could not perceive. All of them had gathered in this orientation chamber for the same reason, to learn the rules of galactic civilization. The instructor was a Velthari named Velthus, an ancient being whose blue skin had faded to pale gray with age, and whose voice carried the weight of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. He moved slowly across the raised platform at the front of the hall, manipulating holographic displays with his 4 delicate hands. Trade routes, Velthus announced, and a map of the galaxy appeared above them all, are clearly marked and must be followed without exception. Sirian took careful notes on her tablet, determined to prove that the Mirith deserved their place among the stars. The Velthari continued through topic after topic: forbidden zones, diplomatic protocols, the proper ways to address members of elder species, and the 17 different forms required to file a formal complaint. It was all so ordinary, so bureaucratic, and Sirian found her attention beginning to wander as the hours passed. She noticed that several of the veteran ambassadors in the room seemed bored as well, checking their own devices or whispering quietly to their neighbors. Then the lights dimmed. The change was subtle at first, and Sirian thought perhaps there was a technical malfunction. But when she looked at the veteran ambassadors, she saw something that made her blood run cold. They had all gone completely still, and several of them had expressions of genuine fear on their faces. One Kethral diplomat, a massive reptilian creature with scales like polished obsidian, actually stood up and walked toward the exit. No one tried to stop him, and no one seemed surprised. "Now," Velthus said, and his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, "we must discuss the humans." Sirian felt a ripple of confusion pass through the newer species in the room. Humans? She had heard the name mentioned once or twice since arriving at the station, but no one had given her any details. From what little she understood, they were a relatively young species from a small planet in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. The humans achieved faster than light travel approximately 200 standard years ago. Velthus continued, making them one of the youngest spacefaring civilizations in known space. A holographic image appeared, a bipedal species with soft skin, no claws, no natural armor, and no obvious weapons. They looked fragile and weak compared to most of the species Sirian had encountered. "Their technology is adequate but not exceptional," the Velthari said, "and their territory is modest in size. By most metrics, they should be considered a minor power at best." Sirian glanced around the room in confusion. Why were the veteran ambassadors still so tense? Why had that Kethral diplomat fled rather than listen to information about such an unremarkable species? "However," Velthus said, and he paused for a long moment, "you must understand something about humanity that cannot be measured by standard metrics." The holographic display changed, and now it showed human military forces. Soldiers in various types of armor, carrying weapons, standing in formations that looked professional but not particularly impressive. "This is the standard human military," Velthus explained, "and while they are competent fighters, they are not significantly different from the military forces of most spacefaring species." Another image appeared, a small group of humans in darker armor, their faces hidden, their equipment unlike anything Sirian had seen before. "These," Velthus said, and his voice trembled slightly, are what humans call special forces. The reaction in the room was immediate and visceral. A crystalline being in the front row made a sound like breaking glass, and Syrian realized it was screaming. 3 more diplomats stood and left the hall without a word. An elderly ambassador from a species Syrian did not recognize began to weep silently. "I do not understand," Syrian said, speaking before she could stop herself. "They are just soldiers, are they not?" Every eye in the room turned to look at her, and the expressions she saw ranged from pity to horror. "Child," Ralphus said gently, "what I am about to show you is classified at the highest levels of coalition security. It is shown to new species only so that you may understand why certain actions must never be taken." The display changed again, and now it showed a fleet of warships, thousands upon thousands of vessels arranged in perfect formation. Text appeared identifying them as the Kethral Subjugation Fleet, 40,000 ships strong, the most powerful military force the Kethral Empire had ever assembled. 80 years ago, Velthus said, this fleet attempted to conquer and enslave a human colony world called Sejong 7. The colony had a population of 3 million civilians and a defensive garrison of only 5,000 soldiers. The image showed the fleet approaching a small blue-green world, and Syrian felt sick at the thought of what was about to happen to those innocent people. The humans responded by deploying a single special forces unit. Velthus continued, consisting of 12 individuals. Syrian waited for more. Surely there must be more. A secret weapon? A hidden fleet? Some kind of advanced technology? 12 humans, Velthus repeated, against 40,000 warships and 17 million Kethral soldiers. The display began playing footage that was clearly taken from the bridge of a Kethral command ship. Alarms were blaring, officers were screaming, and in the background Syrian could see explosions and chaos. Then the footage dissolved into static. "This is the final transmission from the Kethral subjugation fleet," Velthus said into the silence that followed. No ship survived. No soldier escaped. And the human colony remained completely unharmed. Syrian's tablet slipped from her trembling fingers and clattered against the floor. 12 humans did this, Velthus said, and the galaxy has never forgotten. Humans called them special forces. The galaxy prayed never to face them. 80 years earlier, the sky above Sejong 7 burned with the light of 40,000 Kethral warships, and Commander Yun Seok Jin watched them descend through the atmosphere from his position in the mountains. The Colonial Defense Force was fighting bravely, but they were hopelessly outnumbered, and everyone knew it was only a matter of time before they fell. "Command, this is Shadow Team," Yun said into his communicator. "We have visual on the primary landing zone. Enemy forces are establishing a forward operating base approximately 15 kilometers from the capital city." "Understood, Shadow Team," came the reply. "Your mission remains unchanged. Infiltrate enemy lines, locate the command ship, and neutralize all hostile leadership. The fleet cannot provide support, and reinforcements are 17 days away." Yun looked at his team. 11 of the finest soldiers humanity had ever produced, and he saw no fear in their eyes. There was only determination and a cold, patient hunger that would have terrified anyone who did not know what it meant. "Understood, Command," Yun replied. "Shadow Team moving to engage. Tell the colony to hold on. We will end this." Sergeant Cha Minho moved up beside him, her rifle held ready, her dark eyes scanning the terrain ahead. She was the team's second in command, a woman who had survived missions that would have killed ordinary soldiers 10 times over. 15 kilometers of enemy territory, she observed. Volcanic vents to the east, frozen tundra to the north, and toxic marshland to the west. "Any preference, Commander?" Yun smiled, a thin, predatory expression that held no warmth. "We take all 3. Split into 3 fire teams, converge on the command ship from multiple vectors. They cannot watch everywhere at once. The team divided without another word, each soldier knowing exactly what was expected of them. Fire Team 1 would cross the volcanic region, where temperatures exceeded what most species could survive. Fire Team 2 would traverse the frozen north, where the cold would kill an unprotected Kethril in minutes. Fire Team 3 would navigate the toxic swamps, breathing poison that would dissolve the lungs of almost any other creature in the galaxy. For humans, these were merely inconveniences. Lieutenant Bei Donghan led Fire Team 1 through the volcanic hellscape, and the heat was intense enough to make their armor glow faintly. Sweat poured down their faces, and every breath felt like inhaling fire, but they never slowed. They had trained in environments far worse than this, and their bodies had adapted to punishment that would destroy lesser beings. "Contact ahead," Corporal Shin the Jun whispered. "Kethril Patrol, 12 hostiles, moving in standard formation." The Kethril soldiers were massive creatures, each one standing nearly 3 meters tall, with thick scales that could stop most projectile weapons and claws that could tear through steel. They carried plasma rifles and war armor designed to make them nearly invincible. They never saw the humans coming. Donghayan's team moved like shadows through the smoke and steam, and within 30 seconds, all 12 Kethril lay dead on the ground. Not a single shot had been fired. The humans had used only their blades, striking vital points with surgical precision. "Fire Team 1, Objective Alpha secured," Donghayan reported, continuing to primary target. Across the frozen tundra, Fire Team 2 encountered their own obstacles. The cold was brutal, and ice had begun forming on their armor. But Sergeant Cha pushed her soldiers forward without mercy. They had a mission, and nothing would stop them. Not cold, not pain, not the fear of death. "Movement," one of her soldiers whispered. "Kethril bunker, approximately 200 meters ahead." The bunker was heavily fortified, with automated turrets and at least 50 soldiers inside. A conventional assault would be suicide, but Minho had no intention of being conventional. "Thermal charges," she ordered. "Place them on the ventilation system. If they want to stay warm, they can burn." The Kethril never understood what happened. One moment they were safe inside their bunker, and the next moment the air itself caught fire. Those who survived the initial blast stumbled outside, coughing and burning, and the humans were waiting for them. Commander Yun and Fire Team 3 emerged from the toxic swamps like ghosts rising from a grave. The poison had burned their skin and irritated their lungs, but they had pushed through it with the same relentless determination that defined everything they did. "All teams report status," Yin commanded. "Fire Team 1 en route to target, no casualties. Fire Team 2 en route to target, no casualties." Yun allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The mission was proceeding exactly as planned, and the Kethril had no idea what was coming for them. In the Kethril command ship, Fleet Admiral Kethvoran studied the reports from his ground forces with growing unease. Something was wrong. Patrols were going silent. Supply convoys were vanishing, and communication towers were exploding without explanation. "What is happening down there?" he demanded of his officers. "We are uncertain, Admiral," one replied nervously. "Our forces report encounters with human soldiers, but the descriptions make no sense. They say the humans appear from nowhere, kill without sound, and vanish before anyone can respond." "Impossible," Kethvoran growled. "Humans are soft, weak creatures. They cannot pose a threat to our warriors." But even as he spoke, another report came in. An entire garrison wiped out, 200 soldiers killed, and the only evidence left behind was a message carved into the wall in the Kethril language. "We are coming for you." The Admiral felt something cold settle in his chest, and for the first time in his long career of conquest, he tasted fear. On the ground below, Commander Yun gathered his team at the rally point. They had crossed impossible terrain, eliminated countless enemies, and reached the perimeter of the landing zone without losing a single soldier. Now came the hard part. The command ship is directly ahead, Yun told his team. Heavily guarded, surrounded by the entire invasion force, and protected by energy shields that can withstand orbital bombardment. Sergeant Cha smiled, that same cold, hungry smile that Yun knew so well. Then we go through them, she said simply. All of them. Yun nodded and raised his rifle. Shadow Team, he said. Weapons free. Show them what humans can do. The night erupted in fire and blood, and the Kethral Empire learned why the galaxy would one day pray never to face the beings that humanity called Special Forces. Humans called them Special Forces. The galaxy prayed never to face them. The Kethral command ship was a fortress floating in the sky, 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and protected by energy shields that could withstand the combined firepower of most planetary defense systems. Fleet Admiral Kethvoran stood on the bridge, watching the chaos unfold below him, and he could not understand how everything had gone so wrong. Admiral, one of his officers reported, his voice trembling, we have lost contact with Garrison 7. That is the 15th garrison to go silent. In the past 6 hours. How is this possible? Kethvoran demanded. We have 17 million soldiers on this planet. How can a handful of humans be causing such destruction? No one had an answer for him. In the darkness outside the command ship, Commander Yun Seok-jin and his remaining 7 team members prepared for the impossible. 5 of their brothers and sisters had fallen during the campaign, not from weakness or failure, but from the simple mathematics of war. Even the finest soldiers could not fight forever without loss. This is for them, Yun said quietly, touching the names engraved on his armor. The names of every soldier he had ever lost. Every step we take for them. The team moved without sound, without hesitation, without fear. They had studied the command ship's design for weeks before the mission, and they knew every weakness, every blind spot, every vulnerability. Entry point identified, Sergeant Cha reported, her voice barely above a whisper. Maintenance hatch on the lower hull. Security appears minimal, because they never expected anyone to get this close. Lieutenant Bay observed grimly. Commander Yun gave the signal, and the team began their ascent. They climbed the massive hull using magnetic grips, their movements perfectly synchronized, their breathing controlled and steady. Any other species would have been detected immediately, but humans had learned to move in ways that sensors could not easily track. The maintenance hatch opened with a soft hiss, and the team slipped inside like shadows flowing through a crack in reality. We are in, Yun reported to command, knowing they might not receive a response. Knowing it did not matter either way. Beginning final approach to target. The interior of the command ship was vast and maze-like, but the humans navigated it with practiced efficiency. They encountered their first Kethral patrol within minutes. 8 soldiers who never saw the death that came for them. Corporal Shin the Jun moved with fluid grace, his blade finding vital points with mechanical precision. Private Park So Young covered his advance, her rifle silent but deadly. In seconds, the patrol was eliminated, and the team continued forward. Contact ahead, Minho warned. Heavy concentration. Looks like they finally figured out we are here. She was right. The corridor ahead was filled with Kethral soldiers. At least 100 of them, all armed and ready. They had formed a defensive line, shields raised, weapons trained on the only approach. For any normal force, this would have been an impassable obstacle. Commander Yun studied the enemy position for exactly 3 seconds. Donghaeun, take your fire team through the ventilation system and hit them from above. Minho, you are with me. We go straight through the middle. Straight through? One of the younger soldiers asked, disbelief coloring his voice. Commander, there are 100 of them. Yun turned to look at him, and his eyes held the cold certainty of a man who had stopped counting enemies long ago. Then we kill 100 of them, he said simply. Ready your weapons. What followed would later be described by surviving Kethrel witnesses as a nightmare. Made flesh. The humans attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. Their movements too fast to track, their strikes too precise to counter. They were not fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like predators, like the apex hunters their ancestors had evolved to be. Minho took a plasma bolt to her already wounded shoulder, and she responded by grabbing the Kethrel, who shot her and breaking his neck with her bare hands. Yun moved through the enemy formation like a storm, his blade rising and falling in a rhythm of death that nothing could stop. When it was over, 100 Kethrel soldiers lay dead, and the humans stood among them, wounded but unbroken. Move, Yun commanded, and they moved. Fleet Admiral Kethvorn received the reports with growing horror. The humans were inside his ship, cutting through his best soldiers like they were nothing. And every attempt to stop them had failed. Seal the bridge. He ordered, activate all internal defense systems. Someone stopped these creatures, but it was already too late. The doors to the bridge exploded inward, and Commander Yun stepped through. The smoke and fire like a demon emerging from the underworld. His armor was scorched and torn. His face was streaked with blood, some of it his own, and his eyes held a darkness that made Kethvorn's ancient heart freeze in terror. Behind him stood his team, 7 humans who looked like they had walked through the fires of creation itself and emerged unchanged. Fleet Admiral Kethvorn, Yun said, his voice calm and steady despite everything. I am Commander Yun Seok-jin of the Terran Republic Special Forces. You have attacked a human colony and threatened the lives of 3 million innocent people. Kethvorn drew himself up to his full height, nearly 3 meters of scaled muscle and predatory instinct. He had conquered 12 star systems, had crushed countless civilizations beneath his claws, and he would not show fear to this small, soft creature. You are outnumbered, he growled. You cannot win. Even if you kill me, my fleet will continue the invasion. You have accomplished nothing. Yun smiled a thin, terrible expression that held no warmth whatsoever. Your fleet will receive new orders within the hour, he said. Orders to withdraw immediately and never return to human space. You will give those orders yourself, and if I refuse? Yun stepped forward, and Kethvorn found himself stepping back involuntarily. Then I will kill you, Yun said simply, and give the orders myself using your command codes. We cracked your encryption 3 days ago. Did you really think we came here without a plan? The Admiral looked at this human, this small, wounded, impossibly dangerous creature, and he saw his own death reflected in those cold eyes. You are bluffing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I never bluff, Yun replied, and I never make threats that I am not prepared to carry out. You have one chance. Admiral, withdraw your forces and live, or refuse and die. The choice is yours. Kethvorn looked at his officers and his guards, at the humans who stood ready to kill everyone in the room if necessary. He thought of his fleet, his empire, his legacy. Then he thought of the 12 humans who had destroyed everything he had built. I refuse, he said, and he lunged at Commander Yun with claws extended. He never reached his target. Yun moved with speed that should have been impossible for any creature, and his blade found the Admiral's heart before those deadly claws could touch him. I was hoping you would say that, Yun whispered as the Admiral fell. He turned to his team and issued his final orders. Set the charges. We are bringing this ship down. 10 minutes later, the command ship's reactor went critical, and the greatest fleet the Kethrel Empire had ever assembled died with it. Below, on the surface of Sejong 7, 3 million humans looked up at the sky and cheered. Humans called them special forces. The galaxy prayed never to face them. In the present day, a classified briefing was taking place in the deepest levels of Coalition Intelligence Headquarters, and the beings gathered there represented some of the most powerful governments in the known galaxy. They had come seeking answers, seeking to understand how 12 humans had destroyed the greatest military force the Kethral Empire had ever assembled. Intelligence Director Morvith stood at the front of the room, his insectoid body clicking nervously as he prepared to deliver information that would change how every species present understood the universe. Distinguished representatives, he began. What I am about to share with you is the result of 70 years of research, analysis, and careful observation. We have studied humanity extensively, and what we have learned is both fascinating and deeply disturbing. A holographic image of Earth appeared above the conference table, a small blue world that looked peaceful and inviting from space. This is the human homeworld, Morvith explained, and at first glance it appears to be a pleasant garden planet. Many of our species evolved on worlds that were harsh and dangerous, and we assumed that humans came from a gentler environment. The image zoomed in, showing various regions of the planet. We were catastrophically wrong. Data began scrolling across the display. Information about earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, floods, droughts, ice ages, and countless other natural disasters. Earth is what xenobiologists classify as a Category 7 death world. Morvith continued. A planet that seems specifically designed to kill everything living on it. The humans evolved in an environment where the ground could open beneath their feet. The sky could rain fire, and the water could rise to drown entire civilizations. The representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and several exchanged worried glances. But that is only the beginning, Morvith said, because Earth's environment was not even the greatest threat to early humans. The display changed to show various predators. Massive cats with sword-like teeth, enormous bears, packs of wolves, and countless other creatures designed for killing. Humans evolved alongside some of the most efficient predators in the galaxy, Morvith explained, and they were not the biggest, the fastest, or the strongest. They had no claws, no fangs, no venom, and no natural armor. Then how did they survive? One representative asked. Morvith made a sound that might have been a laugh, though it carried no humor. They became something far more dangerous than any predator, he said. They became persistence hunters. The display showed early humans pursuing prey across vast distances, never stopping, never resting, simply following their target until it collapsed from exhaustion. Most predators rely on speed or strength, Morvith explained. They attack, and if they fail, they give up. But humans are different. They do not give up. They follow their prey for hours, for days, for however long it takes. They run their targets to death. The room had gone very quiet. This trait, this absolute refusal to stop, is hardwired into human biology, Morvith continued, and it is the foundation of everything that makes them dangerous. The display changed again, showing human military training facilities. Now imagine, Morvith said, taking beings who evolved to never give up, who survived the most hostile environment in the known galaxy, and training them to be soldiers. That is what a standard human military force represents. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Special forces are something else entirely. Images appeared of humans undergoing training that made several representatives physically ill. Extreme temperatures, sleep deprivation, simulated drowning, psychological stress tests, and physical punishment that would kill most species. These humans volunteered to have everything soft and weak stripped away from them, Morvith explained, and what remains is something that we have no adequate classification for. They are not soldiers in any sense that we understand. They are weapons that think, that adapt, and that absolutely will not stop until their mission is complete. On the planet below, 80 years in the past, Sergeant Cha Min-ho proved exactly why that description was accurate. She had taken 3 wounds that should have been fatal, a plasma burn across her torso, a blade wound in her thigh, and shrapnel embedded in her shoulder. Any rational being would have stopped, would have accepted that the mission was over, would have laid down and died. But Minho was not a rational being. She was a human. She pressed a field dressing against her wounds with one hand and kept her rifle ready with the other. Around her, the battle raged on, and she knew that her team needed her. Private Ka Seung-won had taken a wound of his own, and he could barely walk. "Lean on me," Minho ordered, pulling the younger soldier's arm over her shoulder. "Sergeant," Seung-won protested, "you are hurt worse than I am." "I am aware of that," Minho replied. "Now shut up and move." She carried him for 6 hours through hostile territory, fighting off 3 Kethral patrols along the way, and she never once complained, never once slowed down, never once considered giving up. When they finally reached the rally point, Commander Yun looked at her with something approaching awe. "Report," he ordered. "Fire Team 2 has reached the objective," Minho said calmly. "We encountered heavy resistance, but all hostile contacts have been eliminated. Private KO requires medical attention, and I could use a bandage or 2 myself." She said this while standing in a pool of her own blood, her armor scorched and torn, her face pale from blood loss. Back in the present day, Morveth showed this footage to the assembled representatives, and several of them had to look away. "This is what humans call morale," Morveth explained. "The ability to keep fighting when every logical calculation says that fighting is pointless. We have no equivalent concept in our languages, because we have never encountered anything like it before." The intelligence director moved to the final portion of his presentation. "The Kethral believed that numbers would win," he said. "They had 40,000 ships against 12 humans, and they thought victory was certain. But they made a critical error. They tried to count their enemies." The display showed Commander Yun and his remaining team preparing for the final assault. "Humans do not count their enemies," Morveth said. "They count their ammunition. And when that runs out?" The display showed a human soldier drawing a combat knife, her eyes cold and steady. "They count their knives. And when those break?" The soldier dropped the broken blade and raised her bare fists. "They use their hands. And when they can no longer stand?" The final image showed a wounded human dragging herself toward an enemy position, still fighting, still refusing to surrender. "They crawl. They never stop. They cannot stop, because stopping is simply not in their nature." The briefing room was silent for a long moment. "So you see," Morveth concluded, "it is not human technology that makes them dangerous. It is not their numbers, or their strategy, or their weapons. It is something far more fundamental, something bred into them by millions of years of evolution on a world that tried everything to kill them and failed." He turned off the display and faced his audience directly. "The Kethral learned this lesson too late," he said. "Let us hope we are wise enough to learn it without making the same mistake." Humans called them special forces. The galaxy prayed never to face them. Young diplomat. Syrian could not stop thinking about the footage she had seen in the orientation briefing. The images haunted her dreams and followed her through her waking hours, and she found herself desperate to understand. How could 12 beings accomplish what 40,000 warships could not prevent? What were humans really made of? She searched the station's public records, but the information was sparse and heavily redacted. She asked other diplomats, but they either refused to speak about humans or grew visibly uncomfortable at the mention of the species. Finally, in desperation, she decided to seek out the one source that might give her answers, a human. The Terran Republic maintained a diplomatic mission on the station, and after 3 days of requests, Sirian was granted an audience with Ambassador Park G1. She expected to meet a warrior, a hardened soldier, someone with the cold eyes she had seen in the footage. Instead, she found herself sitting across from an elderly woman with silver hair, warm eyes, and a gentle smile that seemed entirely at odds with everything Sirian had learned about humanity. Ambassador Park served tea with her own hands, a gesture of respect. She explained and waited patiently for her young guest to speak. "I attended the orientation briefing," Sirian finally said, her voice small and uncertain. "They showed us footage of what happened at Sejong 7. Ambassador Park nodded, her expression growing thoughtful. "I see," she said softly. "And you have questions?" "I have so many questions," Sirian admitted. "I do not understand how it was possible. 12 soldiers against an empire. It defies everything I know about warfare, about logic, about the universe itself." The ambassador set down her teacup and folded her hands in her lap. "What you saw was not warfare in the way most species understand it," she explained. "The Kethrel came to conquer, to take land, resources, slaves. They fought for profit and expansion. Our soldiers fought for something very different." "What did they fight for?" "Oh," Ambassador Park said simply, "family. The 3 million people on that colony who would have been enslaved or killed. Every human who might have been next if we showed weakness." She paused, and something shifted in her expression, something old and deep surfacing behind those warm eyes. "You asked how it was possible," she continued. "The answer is that humans do not fight harder when we have more to gain. We fight harder when we have more to lose." Those 12 soldiers were not thinking about glory or victory. They were thinking about children who would never grow up, parents who would never see their sons and daughters again, a way of life that would be destroyed forever. Sirian felt tears forming in her eyes, though she did not fully understand why. "But the cost," she whispered. The footage said only 7 of them survived the mission. 5 gave their lives. Ambassador Park's smile faded, and for a moment she looked very old and very tired. "That is the burden we carry," she said quietly. "Every human who puts on that uniform knows they may not come home. They accept that burden willingly, not because they do not value their own lives, but because they value the lives of others more." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small photograph, old and worn, the edges soft from years of handling. "This was my unit," she said, holding out the image for Sirian to see. The photograph showed 12 young humans in military gear, their faces bright with youth and determination. They were smiling, arms around each other's shoulders, looking like they could take on the entire universe. Sirian stared at the photograph, then looked back at the elderly woman before her. "You?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "You were Special Forces?" Ambassador Park nodded. 50 years ago, she confirmed. "Different war, different enemy, same mission. Protect the innocent. Stop the aggressors. Bring everyone home who can be brought home." "How many?" Sirian asked, dreading the answer. "How many of your unit survived?" The ambassador looked at the photograph with eyes that held decades of grief and memory. "I am the last," she said. "Some fell in that mission, others in later campaigns. A few made it to retirement but passed from age or illness. I am the only one still here." She tucked the photograph back into her pocket, close to her heart. "I carry them with me," she explained. "Their names, their faces, their sacrifices. I carry them so that their deaths meant something, so that the peace they bought with their blood is not wasted." Sirian sat in silence for a long moment, trying to process everything she had heard. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why create something like Special Forces? Why put your own people through such horror?" Ambassador Park's warm smile returned, though it now carried a weight of sadness. "We did not create them to conquer," she said. "We created them so we would never have to. Special forces exist so that ordinary humans can live in peace. They carry the darkness so that others do not have to see it." She leaned forward, and her eyes met Sirian's with gentle intensity. "Every species in this galaxy has warriors," she said. "What makes humans different is not that we can fight. It is that we choose to fight only when we must. And when we must, we hold nothing back. We would rather die than fail the people we protect." Before Sirian could respond, a soft chime indicated an incoming message. Ambassador Park glanced at her communicator, and her expression changed instantly. The warm grandmother vanished, replaced by something ancient and terrible. The same cold focus Sirian had seen in the footage from Sejong 7. It lasted only a moment before the ambassador's face returned to its usual gentleness, but that moment was enough. "Is something wrong?" Sirian asked. "A situation has developed," Ambassador Park said, her voice carefully controlled. "A hostile fleet has attacked the Coalition transport ship. There are hundreds of children aboard." She stood, and despite her age and small stature, she suddenly seemed to fill the entire room. "I must make a call," she said. "Please excuse me." Sirian watched in shock as the elderly ambassador walked toward the door. This gentle woman, who had served tea with her own hands, who spoke of peace and protection, who kept photographs of fallen friends in her pocket. This woman was about to become something else entirely. "Ambassador," Sirian called out, and Park paused at the door. "What will happen to the people who took those children?" Ambassador Park turned, and her eyes held the same cold fire that had burned in Commander Yun's eyes 80 years ago. "They made a terrible mistake," she said quietly. "And they will learn, as the Kethril learned, as every aggressor who threatens innocent lives must learn, that there is no force in this galaxy more dangerous than a human with something to protect." She left the room, and Sirian remained seated, trembling with the weight of understanding. Across the galaxy, in a dozen hidden locations, old soldiers received the same message. They were retired, many of them grandparents, living quiet lives far from the wars of their youth. But when the call came, they answered, because they had made a promise, and humans did not break their promises. They never stopped, they never surrendered, and they never abandoned those who needed them. The galaxy had prayed never to face them. But prayers did not stop humans. Nothing did.